Wheels on 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 wheels. Today, we're going to talk about Argon 18's Dark Matter gravel bike. So Argon 18 make a few different gravel bikes. The main two that they make that we'll talk about in this video is the Dark Matter and the Grey Matter. The Dark Matter is the big brother of the Grey Matter, effectively. It's a carbon fiber gravel bike that is rugged, loads of mounts on it, and is designed to be one bike that can kind of do everything off-road. So whether you want to use this bike for rugged races or rough adventure, the Dark Matter really is a bike that defines performance gravel. Argon 18 updated the Dark Matter a couple of years ago. They didn't make some huge changes, it was all minor changes just to improve the bike a little bit. They updated how the cable integrated into the frame, and they slightly tweaked the stack and reach on the bike. The way I would kind of describe how this bike rides is it actually rides quite a lot like a hardtail. It's very comfortable, it feels very confidence giving when you're on the corners and descending, and it's quite fun still. They wanted to make sure the bike was simple to use, simple to maintain. They wanted to make sure this bike was reliable as well. So if anything happened when you're out there riding, there's ways to solve and fix the bike in those kind of situations. And lastly, they wanted to make sure that this bike was versatile. You could use this for a gravel race, like a UCI gravel race, but at the same time, there's no reason why you couldn't go bikepacking on this one as well. In terms of the simplicity, what Argon 18 have done is they've used a normal round 27.2 seat post. So that's the kind of standard size seat post that you would get on a road or gravel bike anyway. The cabling is internal, but it is external from a stem or anything. So it runs underneath the stem and into a top tube cap basically and into the frame. This means that the cables are out the way if you do want to mount a handlebar bag on the bike, but it also means you can quite easily change your handlebars or your stem length if you need to. You can fit a dropper on this post. You can fit a dropper on this post. You can fit a dropper on this bike if you wanted to put a dropper on. The way this would work is you can run something like Shimano's GRX dropper lever that will work with a dropper post, or you can get these little dropper switches, which Pro make one and Enve make one. I think Wolftooth do as well. The updated Dark Matter has tyre clearance for 45mm tyres, which personally I think is plenty of tyre for most kind of gravel riding and racing. The previous version was 40mm, so having that extra 5mm bumped up clearance is actually incredibly useful. I'm a big believer on putting the biggest tyres you can fit on a frame down to what the brand recommends, because ultimately they're not much slower and you get so much more in terms of comfort and grip with a larger tyre on gravel bikes. There's a few nice little things that Argon 18 have included on the Dark Matter. So for example, there is a down tube protector, which also has bottle mount points on it. So you're protecting the down tube of the bike a bit from any big bangs or rocks coming up and smacking in the bike. The bike also comes with a built-in little chain guide drop thing. And so if you were to drop a chain, it stops the chain getting sucked into the frame and then obviously damaging and scuffing up the frame as well. It's a really nice little touch that they've added onto the bike, in my opinion. Argon 18 for years have used this 3D fit system, which allows you to basically build up the front end of the bike if you need to, and reposition the bearings slightly higher in the frame if you need to. It reduces the need for loads of spacers and can make the bike look a bit tidier, more integrated, but it also keeps the stiffness in the frame as well by raising the bearings higher up. So you're not having loads of spacers underneath your stem, you're basically having less spacers and the bearing being higher up, so it can increase the stiffness of the frame by, I think it's 10-15%. It's pretty significant actually. For the Dark Matter, there's two different headset spacer things that you can use. There's the 0mm spacer, which is what I use on my bike, or there's a 25mm option as well. You can of course use traditional spacers on top of this as well. There's no problem with that at all. One of the things I would love to see with this bike is a 15mm one, because that's basically where I sit and it can integrate it and look a bit neater. But at the moment they offer the 0mm and the 25mm, which offers you a huge amount of versatility in terms of setup. Price-wise, they're very competitive. With the Dark Matter, they're offering 4 different pricing models for this one. Builds start at £3,500 and the top end one is £5,500. Of course, my bike that I'm riding is spec'd very differently to any of the ones that you see that they provide as their pre-built ones, so you can also buy a frame set only and then spec it up and build it however you want. One of the comments I've had quite often with the Dark Matter is that quite a lot of people don't like the shape of the forks. Personally, I actually really like it. It's a bit more of an old school shape, it's got a slight bend in the fork, and the reason why Argon 18 have done this is to help with compliance and comfort. There was a test done quite a few years ago, and you can find it online if you have a quick search, talking about fork compliance and comfort, and Argon 18's fork with the bend in it actually tested really, really well in the sense of providing additional comfort. It does also help extend the geometry of the bike a bit by extending the wheelbase, which helps with confidence and just how it rides and how it handles, especially when it gets quite rough. One of the other features that's really nice on the Dark Matter is they come with this massive, huge chainstay protector. So if you end up getting some chain slap from riding on the rough stuff and the chain hits the frame, it helps protect the frame from getting any damage on it, basically. The Dark Matter does come with a lot of mounts. You've got top tube mounts, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bottle cage mounts inside the frame. You've got fork mounts. You've got the ability to add fenders onto the bike or mud guards, depending on what your language is. There's loads of ways to allow you to be able to carry a lot of stuff on this bike and also be able to use it in the winter and when the conditions aren't so good, which is fantastic actually. It's nice to have all those different offerings. So who is the Dark Matter for? Now, if you're looking for a gravel bike, I think the Dark Matter is a great option as a bike that can kind of do a bit of everything, especially if you're in that point where you don't necessarily know if you want to do sort of gravel races or you want to do an ultra or you want to do bike packing things. It's a very versatile bike which will allow you to kind of do everything and anything you throw at it. It's actually a really fun bike to ride because there's not really been any point where I've ridden it and thought, oh, this feels a bit unsafe or a bit sketchy. It seems to just eat up the terrain, doesn't really matter how rough it is. And like one of the things that I found, which I was pleasantly surprised at, is it actually holds speed really well. So when you get up to speed, it just seems to be quite content to sit at speed. And that's actually really quite nice to have that in a bike. In terms of how it rides, the closest thing I can think of is a bit more like a hardtail. And what I mean by that is it feels calm, especially when it gets rough. Sometimes some gravel bikes I've ridden in the past, when it gets really rough, you feel like you're being completely like shaking around like that. And it does start to feel a bit not fun. So riding a bike that actually seems to give you a bit more compliance in that sense really is a lovely bonus, to be honest with you. I didn't expect it, and I was pleasantly surprised by that. The Argon 18 Dark Matter does come in 2 colorways. Mine is the sort of green, I think it's called olive colorway, which is a green and goldy colorway. They also do a red and red colorway. It's like a bright red and dark red. Mine is built up with GRX Di2, which is the 11-speed version, which is 815. I've actually made some interesting tweaks to the group set. So I'm running the GRX shifters and I've got them set up so the internal buttons control the rear mech and then the shifting on them is kind of normal how it would be. But I'm running a larger cassette than what is generally recommended with this particular group set. All of Shimano's group sets, the range that the cassettes can hold is larger than what you would see that they recommend. But what Shimano likes to do is they like to make sure that the shifting is as good as possible, so they limit the range on what they recommend. For me, I wanted to make sure I had an easier easy gear, but I still wanted to have a hard gear. So I wanted a wider range cassette. So to do this, I've got an 11 to 40 cassette on the rear. And on the front, I'm running a 49-30 chainring. It's normally a 49-31 chainring with that crankset. The slightly smaller chainring seems to shift absolutely fine on the front mech. And the larger cassette, what I've done is I've used a wolf tooth road link, which effectively drops the mech down slightly by replacing one of the links on the mech. And it means that you can ride with a larger cassette. Wolftooth themselves say that this particular device, the road link, is actually only designed to be used on a 1x setup, but it seems to work absolutely fine on a 2x setup. I've had no issues with this. I've actually done ultras this way using this kind of setup and I've had no problems at all. And I like using the Wolftooth road link as opposed to stretching the limits of what the mech can do, because it just takes a bit of strain and pressure off the mech by dropping it into a slightly different position. So have a look at the Wolftooth road link if you are looking to try and get an easier easy gear but still want a hard gear. The finishing kit that I'm using with this bike all comes from Enve. It's an Enve inline seat post, Enve stem, 120mm stem, the Enve AR handlebars. So this is not their gravel bar, but it's also not their road bar. They call it an AR bar, which is their all-road bar. It's the same handlebar that I've got on my Krypton Pro. It's a little bit aero, so it's really nice, wide and comfortable on the top, but it has a really nice amount of like vibration management and a bit of flex in it, so it feels fantastic to ride off-road actually. The wheels I'm using on my Dark Matter are Enve 3.4s built up with Chris King hubs. Literally, I think some of the best wheels I've ever had. I can't say much more about them. Chris King hubs are amazing and Enve rims are amazing. I decided to go for the 3.4 being a slightly shallower rim because it's still getting an aero gain. It's a super lightweight rim anyway, but actually the 3.4 is quite a wide rim, so it works really well with a wide gravel tyre. They do have their own gravel range of wheels as well, the G series wheels, but they are a shallower profile wheel. So if you're racing, maybe you want something a bit deeper to kind of like give you that aero benefit, because aero is a thing in gravel. You didn't hear it here first, it happened Unbound. Tyres on the bike are Schwalbe G1 Overlands. I have also had on here the G1R and the G1 RS, but I really like the Overland as a tyre. It has a bit more puncture protection as opposed to the R and the RS, and it seems to be the gravel tyre that it's becoming my go-to one. Really like riding it. Riding 45mm tyre front and rear, and then yeah, been perfect. Can't really complain about that at all. Just a few things that I think would help improve this bike going forward, which some people might agree with, some might not. The first thing for me is a threaded bottom bracket. I just really like threaded bottom brackets. I think they're a lot easier to maintain and sort of live with day to day, especially where British gravel tends to be mud, sand, rivers, dirt, gravel, mud, 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 grass, mud, mud, swamp. Like, to have that kind of threaded bottom bracket just makes it a bit easier for serviceability. I think it'd be quite cool to have the UDH mech on it, because those mech hangers are just really easy to get hold of wherever you go. I'd love to see an internal frame storage like we have on the Krypton. The Dark Matter came out before the Krypton, so that's probably why it's not on there currently, but it'd be a lovely feature to be able to have your tools and everything inside the frame. So one of the other things I'd love to see is a suspension correct geometry. Now what I mean by that is when you have a suspension fork on a bike, of course the fork goes up and down, and the geometry, if it's not kind of designed for the frame set, the potential that you would use a suspension fork, it can make the bike go really, really long and really, really slack. So effectively, if that's what your fork is like currently, that's the rear wheel, that's the front wheel, it can end up going like that, which means it can really affect how the bike handles and turns. So a suspension correct frame accommodates for that additional length, and it's something that has to really be done when the frame's being designed. You can, of course, use things like a Redshift stem. There's other brands of suspension stems available, but I think that the forks look quite cool, and they probably give you a bit more suspension as opposed to a stem would have. And that, Fox make a really nice gravel suspension fork, so that'd be quite cool to see that as something as a consideration. And then my last thing that I would think would be interesting to see, and maybe this is just because of the direction that gravel is going, is that this bike could end up having even bigger tyre clearance. We're seeing at Unbound, for example, that people are riding mountain bike tyres and they're not really any slower. So I don't see an issue of going for a bigger tyre clearance to be able to accommodate for riding some more rough and burly stuff. I think there's a very interesting blurring line now between gravel, mountain biking, and also the directions of whether you want to do really rough and burly gravel, which is what a lot of the gravel is like in the UK, like fire track gravel, which tends to be more of what you see, I guess, in America and in Spain, for example, at Badlands, or, a mix of everything. For me, the Dark Matter is a fantastic option as a bike if you want one adventure bike to kind of do it all. You could always run like 2 different wheel sets, one for more of a road tyre or a more slick gravel tyre, and one for proper burly off-road stuff, which will give you the variety on it. But it's a fantastic option if you're considering a gravel bike that you want to use for racing, for some bike packing trips, for doing an ultra. It really can do a bit of everything, and it looks quite cool. It looks like a tank. Grr. If you have any questions or anything you want to know about Argon 18's Dark Matter, drop a comment below and I'll answer them the best I can. Hopefully this was useful for you to see a bit more information about that bike. It's genuinely a bike that I've been really impressed with when I've been riding it. It just seems to be very, as I keep saying, one of the things I really take away from it is it's very confidence giving and not confidence taking. And when you're riding rough stuff, that's pretty damn important. Bye. Like, comment, subscribe. My coffee's cold. Oh no, it's not actually. Wait. Tepid.